Today, we're going to be exploring a different type of trail. The Kentucky Bourbon Trail, that is. If you've never heard of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, well, I'll do my best to explain as this video goes on. But today we're at the Wilderness Trail Distillery. Most distilleries offer some sort of guided tour, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. One of the best parts of these tours is they usually include samples.
Herbal and botanical flavor profile. We have a 7-year rye whiskey on the shelf that we didn't use any supplementation rye in it. So do we have a favorite of our 3 core products yet?
We were already sourcing a non-GMO rye. Now this rye has a little bit different flavor profile than your normal rye.
Now the samples are great, but for me my favorite part is going behind the scenes and seeing exactly how one of my favorite beverages is actually produced. Each of these giant containers has whiskey that's in a different stage of the fermentation process. Basically, they combine the grain with water and yeast and let it cook. At this point, the whiskey has similar properties to beer, and it's actually called distiller's beer. You can actually feel the heat that's being produced by the process. After fermentation is complete, the whiskey heads over to the still. This not only raises the alcohol content, but it also helps to remove some of the impurities. One of my favorite parts about these tours is not only seeing how whiskey is made, but also learning the history of each individual distillery. I've been to a handful, and they all have their own unique stories, how things were done back in the day, and what led to bourbon becoming the official spirit of the United States. I've really enjoyed the rest of this tour, but I gotta say the highlight is tasting whiskey directly off the still. Basically, this is the equivalent of legal moonshine because it hasn't been aged yet. Depending on the distillery, this comes off the still anywhere between 120 and 160 proof. And let me tell you, you can smell and taste all of that. It was pretty delicious. They've come up with a special way to smell and taste the whiskey straight off the still. Not really sure if it does much, but it seems cool when you're doing it. I definitely would not want to have a huge glass of this, but it's cool to see what it tastes like before entering the barrel. Once it's in the barrel, the flavor mellows out and it starts absorbing some of the wood flavors. Whiskey barrels are actually charred, which adds even more levels of complexity to the flavor. If you've never had, well, moonshine, it's definitely a unique flavor, but the barrels are definitely needed.
Up to Rick House G. 1 to 3, 3 to 7, 7 comes down to 1, and I do that every so often to create consistency inside the barrels by exposing the barrels to different amounts of light, heat, and air.
These buildings are rick houses. Basically, it's just a big storage facility for barrels of whiskey. They need a place to store all the aging barrels of whiskey. Typically, a barrel of whiskey ages for between 2 and 10 years, sometimes even longer depending on the product. These rick houses are massive storage facilities, sometimes with over 50,000 barrels of aging whiskey. The link for the Kentucky Bourbon Trail is in the description below. This video wasn't sponsored by them, I just really love bourbon, and this is such a cool way to see how it's made.